Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Staff, roll call.
Attendance noted.
Okay, thank you. Next, approval of the minutes for September 22nd.
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Carries, okay. This is an opportunity for the citizens to address the commission on items not on the agenda. Is there anyone that wishes to address the commission? Okay, seeing none. Move on to, we have 4 public hearings. First item is conditional use permit and variance related to expansion of a legally non-conforming use of 308 78th Street East, Progress Valley. Staff?
Thank you. Progress Valley is a nonprofit organization that's been providing chemical health treatment services for adults since 1972. In 1978, the Richfield City Council approved a special use permit to allow Progress Valley to convert the Assumption Church Convent building into a residential treatment facility serving up to 28 chemically dependent persons. At that time, the proposed use did not fit neatly into any of the described uses in the zoning code, and that continues to be the case now. In 1978, city staff and the council agreed that because of the relatively isolated location, the potential for negative impacts was slim, and there was a need for this type of service in this area. Progress Valley has now operated from this location for 35 years. Progress Valley is requesting permission to expand and remodel their building. The proposed expansion will not increase the number of persons treated on this site, but rather it will bring the building into compliance with a number of current code requirements. Those include bedroom sizes, ADA requirements, kitchen facility requirements. It will also provide additional group and individual meeting spaces and office areas. As part of the adoption of the 494 corridor regulations in 2005, the city included provisions to allow limited expansion of nonconforming buildings and uses in these mixed-use districts. So long as certain conditions can be met, legally nonconforming buildings are permitted to expand with council approval of a conditional use permit. There are no dimensional limitations put on that type of expansion. That's a building expansion. Legally nonconforming uses can request a conditional use permit to expand by up to 10% of the existing gross floor area, provided that use does not significantly impede implementation of the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan. Progress Valley is requesting a variance to allow them to expand the building by 50%. However, that doesn't include an intensification of their use. Like I said, they will continue to serve 28 people. The city's comprehensive plan and mixed-use zoning district regulations stress a mix of uses, walkability, cohesive design, and active uses. The applicant is proposing to continue operation of a successful business on a site that is significantly constrained by its size, location, and limited visibility. There's little potential for assembly of a larger piece of land at this location. The comprehensive plan envisions this area as a continued location of quasi-public uses, which include churches, schools, and nonprofit organizations. The applicant has proposed a plan that includes not only improved facilities for their clients and staff, but also one that significantly improves the site's overall compliance with zoning requirements. It's not possible to bring the building up to current code standards related to bedroom size, kitchen facilities, ADA, those things I mentioned, without a variance to allow expansion that will be greater than 10% of the current building size. It's staff's opinion that the proposal meets the requirements necessary for the approval of the conditional use permit and variance. I'll just go through those criteria quickly in a little bit more detail. The expansion of the legal nonconforming use is technically limited to 10%. The intent of that regulation was to limit the intensification of uses that were thought not to be compatible with the mixed-use districts. This proposal is not actually asking for any sort of intensification. So it sort of falls into both of these categories, an expansion of a nonconforming use, but also expansion of a building. The nonconforming building, like I said, there are no limitations put on the dimensional expansion as long as it meets current code requirements, which this does. It either meets or improves upon all of the zoning code requirements. The criteria for issuing a variance are also listed in your staff report. very quickly, the proposal has to be, the applicant has to propose to use the property in a reasonable manner. We believe that is the case. They're proposing to continue to use the property as they have been for 35 years here. There also have to be unique circumstances that apply to the property and use. Again, we believe this is the case. Supervised living facilities are not currently permitted in any of the city's zoning districts. Not only would it be difficult to find an alternative location for this facility, but Progress Valley has been operating here without significant problem for many, many years. It seems reasonable to allow this expansion in a neighborhood that has coexisted with this use for so long. Finally, we don't anticipate any negative impacts. There really is no change to the use. It is only to the dimensions of this building, and we believe that the site itself is going to be significantly improved. Finally, land use approvals are typically granted for 1 year from their issuance. Within that time, the applicant has to either complete the construction or have applied for building permits and have made significant progress. The applicant is requesting an extended time frame due to the particulars of their use and the need to relocate current tenants during construction. Progress Valley anticipates relocating clients in late September or early October of next year, following completion of renovations to a new site in Bloomington. Site construction will begin here in Richfield on or before October 15th of next year, and completion is anticipated in the spring of 2016. Staff is recommending that we grant an additional year for them to complete these renovations. Finally, in addition to the city notifications that went out about this project, the variance, and the conditional use permit, Progress Valley sent notice to neighboring properties regarding their plans. As of today, we have received nothing but letters of support for the project. We have not received any calls against the project. If you have any questions for staff, I can answer those. Otherwise, Suzanne is here from Progress Valley also to answer questions on their behalf.
Okay, first of all, anybody have any questions of staff? No? Suzanne, did you want to speak any further to this, or did you feel it was covered? Okay, very good. Okay, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone else that wished to talk to the commission relative to this? Okay, seeing none, may I ask for a close of the public hearing?
Second.
Okay. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Discussion? Hearing none, I ask for a motion.
I move to support staff's recommendation and allow the project to go forward.
Okay. Got a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. 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 Any opposed? Carries. Pretty easy. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to item number 2, it is consider land use applications related to construction of a new building for a place of worship at 6605 First Avenue and 6600 through 6608 Stevens Avenue. Staff?
Thank you. Central Baptist Theological Seminary owns 4 adjacent parcels at 6601 and 6605 First Avenue and 6600 and 6608 Stevens Avenue. Southview Baptist Church met at this site for many years until their final service was held in September 2013. The congregation donated these properties to the seminary to put them up for sale on their behalf. The existing church building at 6605 First Avenue has mold issues and failing mechanical systems. The 2 single-family properties on Stevens Avenue were held by Southview Baptist as rental properties and were occupied by members of the congregation. The applicant, Diamond Lake Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses, is proposing to acquire the 4 properties and build a new religious facility known as a Kingdom Hall. The proposed Kingdom Hall would be a 1-story, 4,085 square foot building with seating for 132 people. All of the existing structures on the site would be demolished. The applicant is requesting an amendment to the city's comprehensive plan to change the designation of 6600 and 6608 Stevens Avenue from low-density residential to quasi-public. They're also requesting a conditional use permit to allow a religious institution. We'll get into the policy considerations of those two requests, beginning with the conditional use permit. In the single-family residential zoning district, religious institutions are a conditionally permitted use, provided that the following conditions are met. The first is that the site shall abut a collector or arterial street. This is met. The second is that the outdoor facilities designed for group activities should be set back at least 40 feet from any lot line. This does not apply as no such facilities are planned. And then lastly, buffering should be provided to mitigate noise and any adverse visual impacts on adjacent properties. And this condition will also be met. We've also attached a few additional stipulations to the approval of the conditional use permit. Namely that the applicant shall submit a final landscaping plan in compliance with city code. The applicant shall also submit a photometric lighting plan, and that the applicant will be responsible for the continual maintenance of landscaping in accordance with these plans. And then the council must also find that the 8 general requirements to grant a conditional use permit are met. Full discussion of those requirements can be found in a document attached to the staff report, but the 2 key considerations from that are that the proposed use is consistent with the goals, policies, and objectives of the city's comprehensive plan, and that there is a public need for such use at the proposed location. And then the policy considerations for the comprehensive plan amendment. The comprehensive plan is a vision and a guide for future land use decisions in the city. This plan guides 6601 and 6605 First Avenue as quasi-public. That designation includes religious institutions. The plan guides 6600 and 6608 Stevens Avenue as low-density residential. Under that current designation, potential redevelopment of the Stevens Avenue properties could include single-family, 2-family, or a cluster home development. Amending the city's comprehensive plan is a question of community character, and the factors to be considered in that decision are qualitative rather than quantitative. Whether or not this change is appropriate and desired for the neighborhood is a decision that should be made by the appointed and elected leaders of the community rather than by city staff. That concludes the staff report. We'll be happy to answer any questions. The applicant is here as well to answer any questions that you may have of them. Thank you.
Okay, any questions of staff? I'll refrain, but I have a couple questions. Is the applicant here, and would they wish to address anything that, any items at all? Okay. And then this is a public hearing, so this is an opportunity for the residents to come forward and speak. So when you come up to the podium, if you'd sign in and then address us with your name and address, please.
Good evening. My name is Steve Vopatic. I live 2 houses down on Stevens from where this proposed conditional use is going to occur. I'm very much in favor of the Diamond Lake Jehovah's Witness being allowed to build their Kingdom Hall there. I only have one small objection, and that is the placement of the parking lot. If the parking lot were to be put on the First Avenue side over by the Old Country Buffet parking lot, I would feel much better about it because that's a very busy area already. We have a nice calm street with very little traffic on Stevens Avenue, and I think all the people, I'm speaking for the people that I've talked to in the neighborhood, some of which are here, they said that they don't want to have our peace and quiet disrupted by a lot of additional traffic along the street, especially when they could just as easily put the parking lot on the other side of the property. I'm certainly in no way, shape, or form against them building their Kingdom Hall there. In fact, I'm very much in favor of it. I would like to see the two dwellings that are there now gone because, you know, frankly, they're not really assisting us in our property values or anything like that. However, if a parking lot comes on the Stevens Avenue side instead of the First Avenue side where there's already the OCB parking lot, I think that would be detrimental to our peace and quiet and also detrimental to our property values on resale. Thank you.
So I will just note that while the parking lot is located on the Stevens Avenue side of the properties, there is no curb cut on Stevens Avenue. All traffic would ingress and egress on First Avenue. No traffic would be added to Stevens. There's no access. There's no access
Okay,
there.
other comments?
We'll pull up the site plan there. You can see that on the east edge or the Stevens Avenue edge of the property, there would be significant landscaping along Stevens there, including trees and shrubs, and there all vehicle access would be through First Avenue as it is today.
My name is Derek Naveen. I live at 6621 First Avenue, right behind Steve there. So I just had a couple questions again about the parking lots. Obviously, the ingress and egress is off First Avenue. I was just wondering if there was you could provide any justification for why there's no ingress or egress from 66th Street? Or has there been any thought of that?
I think the primary consideration with that is the Hennepin County would prefer. 66th Street is a Hennepin County road, which they're actually reconstructing in 2016, 2017. And county policy is biased in favor of fewer driveways and curb cuts off the county road, keeping those on the cross streets. So that was more of a county level consideration.
Is there any, that's the final plan, or these final plans then, or subject to change at all?
As of this time, this would be this site plan does meet all city codes in that regard. In that the existing entrance for the current church building that's there is also off of First Avenue.
Okay. So there's also access off of 6th Street current.
Correct. Yeah, there is access today off of both, but the county's preference is to close those remaining additional entrances and exits.
I also had a question on this current one you have up there. The trees that you have, those circles around there, is that affected foliage growth? Is that
the larger circles are to represent overstory trees
okay.
to be added to the site.
I'm a traffic engineer, and one thing I've noticed right away is that you're going to have site issues with those trees. I'm sure you're interested in that.
Yeah, and our Public Works and Engineering Department have reviewed these plans. Yes, and they'll look at. We've requested a final landscaping plan from the applicant as well, and engineering will look over those.
Okay, thank you.
Questions for staff? As the plan seems to indicate, it's 42 parking spaces. Is that correct?
44.
Oh, you got 44?
Yeah,
Maybe I miscounted. It's 44?
44 parking spaces, okay. Yes. The requirement is 1 parking space per 3 seats, and they're meeting that requirement without any reductions or anything.
Okay, so it will not exceed 44 on site.
That's correct.
I'm sure that meets code and so on. My concern is our experience has been newer places that we put into Richfield seem to be more successful than we give them credit for. And I would imagine that a church might not be any different than a Menards or a Pizza Luce, which spills over into the street parking a lot. So my question is, are 44 parking stalls going to be enough for everyone that's going to be coming to this church?
Could we come back and address that after we finish the public hearing? I'd like to keep going since there's someone who's still up here to talk.
Certainly. I'd also like to offer one other observation on 66th Street. And what came to my mind when I was looking at this with no egress and so on from 66th Street, you go a little further down, you run into O'Reilly, and they had the same question and wanted to do the same thing. And if you notice, there's no entrance or exit off of 66th Street for them. So it would be the same for this.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next person.
Hi, my name is Tracy Satterland, and I live on Stevens, just a couple houses down here. And my concern too was the off-street parking. How much extra parking is there going to be needed? And is that going to spill out onto Stevens? And I'm concerned about the additional traffic. And then the parking lot too. Just the fact that we're taking away green space and paving 2 lots is a concern to me. Again, I don't necessarily think the 2 houses that are there are a real benefit to the community, and the building that's there certainly isn't. It's a horrible looking building, and the parking lot there is crumbly and falling apart. But I also don't want to see a crumbly, falling apart parking lot ending up at the end of our street in a few years as either. So I'm concerned just in general about, the plans for upkeep, the overflow parking, the additional traffic in the neighborhood, and just the noise and the trash that could be blowing through because it's going to be an open space.
Next.
Hi, Linda Shirtleff, 6627 First Avenue South. Pretty much my, what I want to say is opposite of what Steve had to say for living on Stevens and being on First Avenue, the increased traffic that will come on our street. I know Wells Fargo, when you exit there, they have a sign that says right turn only. So it doesn't, there's no additional traffic going into the residential area. Could that be a possibility to add as some sort of a compromise? Possibly. And then the other thing, the monument sign in the corner. Right now, when Southview Baptist Church, they had a van that used to sit there sometimes in the corner, and it was very hard to see eastbound traffic coming. And I don't know how tall the monument is slated to be, and if that's going to cause any issues seeing the eastbound.
Anyone else? Okay. I wonder if the applicants might want to come up and address some of the questions that have been asked.
Appreciate all the comments. As far as
Sorry, you need to speak into the microphone, please.
we appreciate all the comments that were already made. Maybe you can facilitate the questions and we'll just answer them as we go. Is that okay?
Okay, well, I guess the first thing is about the parking. That's the first thing I heard, and the access to the
Yeah.
residential streets.
And just, I guess, so the neighborhood kind of understands our situation. Right now, our congregation currently meets in South Minneapolis. We're over at 4400 4th Avenue. It's a building that was also a church that we purchased, probably 4 or 5 years ago and renovated it into a Kingdom Hall. We meet there right now. Our congregation is 62 in size. That's how many we have currently. So it's not a large group by any means. At our meetings, we typically have anywhere from 60 to 80 people. So the parking that's being planned for would more than accommodate our congregation very easily. We probably have, of that, maybe 20 cars that come, given the fact that we have children and others that don't have vehicles. So there's probably at any given meeting, maybe 20 cars, 20 to 25 on a regular basis. There may be occasions like a wedding or a funeral, or once a year we have a special observance of Christ's death where we might have more cars because it's a little bit larger occasion, but even then, our congregations are divided up amongst the Twin City areas in such a way where no congregation is usually greater than 100 people or so. That's how we typically tend to be. So I think the parking, what's planned, will accommodate it, so you're not going to have to worry too much about us trying to park on the street or anything like that. The building we're in right now has 7 parking spots. That was the existing church parking lot, and because we didn't change the use of that building, we didn't have to add additional parking. We couldn't because we don't have space to do it, and there we do park on the street because there is just not any other option. But here, it'll be wonderful to have 40 spots. So I don't think that'll be too much of an issue. Any other concerns?
Okay. Other questions? Tom, yours?
Oh, if you've got one, go ahead.
I'm just curious when services are, so when you're
Yeah.
expecting kind of peak traffic to be, and then also whether it's common that, non-meetings are taking place, so community events take place there,
Yeah,
if that's a regular activity also.
we don't really have any community events. Our community work's usually done by going out in the neighborhoods, and you know us for going door to door, and that's kind of our community work. As far as we don't have a daycare. We don't have. I'm trying to think what other churches may have. We don't have dinners or bingo or anything like that going on. We go there to meet to worship God. So typically we have 2 meetings during the week. We're gonna have one during a weekday. Takes place at 7:30 in the evening. Lasts about an hour and a half. Sunday we'll have one depending on the time, but usually around 9:30 or 10 o'clock. And that lasts about the same, about an hour and a half to 2 hours. Now during the week, we may have small groups where we may have 4 or 5 cars that utilize the building to meet up, to kind of organize, to go out into our ministry work. But as far as meetings, that's about it during the week. Each congregation, that's the setup. Wherever you go in the United States, it's going to be that.
Other questions?
No. Would it be possible to estimate the number of cars that would be taking a left or a right out of that parking lot? I know
Yeah.
it's kind of a wild question, but one of the audience members suggested something that if there just aren't going to be a lot of folks turning left, it might be.
I think we can to some degree because a lot of our members live in South Minneapolis. There's 3 that I know of that live right in the neighborhood around this location, but both of them are on the other side of 66. The 3rd one would be south of there. But generally speaking, anybody that comes to the facility is going to come either from Cedar Avenue or 35W and come down 66th Street, or come straight down Nicollet to 66th and turn left and then turn right. So we don't really anticipate a lot of traffic in the neighborhood, just 66th Street. We do have some that use public transportation, which is an ideal location for that. You have the crossroads of Nicollet and 66th. So for us, that was a very appealing thing. So there you have some foot traffic. But I don't anticipate a lot of traffic trying to utilize either Stevens or First, particularly not Stevens, because there's no entrance from.
Any other questions?
The one woman asked about the monument sign, and that's not a fixed in stone type of thing. We'll work with the city on heights and sizes and all that to make sure it's not an issue for a sight line for traffic.
Okay. Good.
I was kind of expecting the monument to be stone.
Yeah. Well, usually they're brick. That's typically what we do. But
And just to clarify, staff, the exit situation is taken care of, right? That's not an issue.
It does meet. It does meet city code. Given that there is an existing entrance there for the current use.
Okay.
And really, the requirement is that the requirement in city code for granting a conditional use permit for a religious facility is that it abut a collector an arterial or collector street. The code doesn't specifically say that that vehicular access must be on that street.
Okay, very good. Okay, any other comments or questions? Yes, you step up to the mic, please.
Tracy Satterlund again. I just had an additional question about the lighting in the parking lot, how bright those lights are going to be, and are they on all night? And I know there's houses right across the street, so I don't think it would affect me so much, but I'm just wondering about the effect of that additional parking lot being lit.
Yeah, so
Staff, do you want to address that first?
the city does have lighting standards with minimums and maximums for brightness. We've asked that one of the conditions of approval was that the applicant submit a photometric lighting plan of the parking lot, and staff will ensure that those standards are met. And if there, and if there were an issue where, someone believed the lights to be too bright, that's something that could be investigated.
Okay. And relative to your question about lights on and off, do they stay on all night? Can you tell me that?
Mr. Chair, in that I don't see any on the diagram. Maybe I'm missing them, but I'm just curious if they had a sense for where those might be.
Yeah, actually, we have it planned out now, so I think we could probably submit that drawing in the next couple days to you to look at. We were working on the company that provides the lighting to do the photometric layout for us, and one of the gentlemen that we depend on was out of town for a few weeks, so he's back. He did the drawing, so we can submit that to you. They are on timers, so again, we have a lot of control over when they go on and off. So if I know I used to attend the congregation in Bloomington, and that was a thing that came up there. Very similar setting where you're in a residential neighborhood. It's over on 108th and Zenith. And same thing, we had one neighbor that mentioned at a certain time it was kind of a distraction. So we just turned it and put it on a separate timer. And, we're willing to work with the neighbors on things like that. We don't want to be a nuisance to anybody, so we'll work with the neighborhood on lighting.
Very good. Excellent.
Chair Jabs,
Yes.
I just wanted to add a little bit about our lighting requirements, just so you know. There is a minimum actually for public parking lots, and that's a safety issue that we work with the police on. We don't want those areas to be so dark that they would be less attract people that you don't necessarily want hanging out in a parking lot overnight. But those minimums are very low. We also require full cutoff shields on lights. That means that light should not be spilling off of their parking lot onto your street or your property. It should be contained at the property lines and at the lights. So that's why we require the photometric plan with all of those details about the specifics of the fixtures. So if there's ever a problem, you should certainly contact us, but we do try to address that up front.
I was just going to mention, Phil, our architect, mentioned that recently we used some new technology on one of our other Kingdom Halls in Burnsville using LED lighting. So if any of the neighbors would want to, drive by that at night, kind of see what kind of light it produces, we're at this point speccing something very similar to that. So we give them an idea for the kind of light that comes from the fixture. But again, the city will go over all that with us.
I believe that all the concerns have been answered. Is there any other open before we close the public hearing? Any other questions? Okay. Could I ask for a motion?
Move to close public hearing.
Thank you. Okay. Motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Carries. Okay. Any discussion amongst the commission?
Commissioner Jabs, I guess with respect to Commissioner Rubline's concern about parking, even though Salvation is free, I think Hot Wings and sales on 2x4s have tended to demonstrate a larger power to congregate people in one place. I don't know that parking is going to be a substantial issue.
Yeah. It certainly doesn't sound like it. I was satisfied with the answer. However, with the caveat that if it does become a problem, the city may come back and seek remedy. And I would certainly would encourage staff to do that if it were a problem, and that the conditional use permit allow that flexibility. For all I know, you could, congregate with half of South Minneapolis coming in, you'd be successful. Would wish you all the luck to do that. But given the public comment and staff's recommendation, I would move approval of this with the caveat that staff approve the buffering and landscaping and so on before letting them move forward.
Second.
Okay, motion and second been made?
I'm sorry, just to clarify, the motion on the table, are you amending the motion to include it in an additional stipulation, or you're approving as written? Your comments about the parking, were you asking us to put an additional stipulation in there about parking?
I guess, yes. I mean, there was enough, we've had enough experience that issues can arise. I doubt that there will be, but I'd like to have that flexibility in there that if there is a problem, if something becomes a nuisance, that the applicant would be willing to work with the city at resolving something. Is that necessary or
Yeah, that's my
possible?
question.
Or-
If you're going to amend the motion, yes, that it is necessary to state that. Are you asking me if I think it's a necessary condition?
Yes. I mean, do you, or should I just let it go?
Is it,
they meet the minimum requirements. We don't anticipate there being a problem. You certainly can, because it's a conditional use permit, add it as a stipulation if you would like. We have not typically done that for uses that meet the requirements. We have done that for uses that are shy of the requirements, where we're approving some variance or some adjustment. But that is the prerogative of the Planning Commission and Council to add conditions to a conditional use permit. So if you would like to do that, it is certainly within your power to do so.
from my perspective, I'm not in favor of doing that. I think that they seem to have met the things that we've asked them to do, and I think if it becomes an issue later on, it's a talkable item that can be taken care of. My opinion.
All right, I'm fine with that. So then I would refine my motion just to recommend the approval as staff has outlined.
And my second stands.
Okay, motion and second has been made. Any discussion at all? Susan?
Yeah, I just wanted to say
Thanks for saying that. I too want to compliment the neighbors for coming out tonight and talk. I did have some skepticism because I wasn't sure how the neighbors would react to it. But I'm glad that you did come out, so I got the other side of the story. And so I appreciate that very much, and I'm welcome. So that's good. Any other comments? Yes.
I have one more comment about the motion. I'm sorry, there are two motions in the table, so let's make sure that we move
Okay,
each
I'll move
motion separately.
All right,
Very good. So
let me go back then.
does yours go for the first one, Tom?
Let me go
So
back
there's
and
a
make
motion to approve the amendment to the comprehensive plan and a motion to approve the conditional use permit.
I'll move first to amend the comprehensive plan.
Okay, motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Carrying none. Tom, number two.
I would move to now approve the conditional use permit.
And I'll second that.
Okay, motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. Thank you. Okay, and good luck here.
Thank you for keeping me on the straight and narrow there.
moving on. Item number 3, amendment to the city zoning ordinance. Proposed ordinance will more clearly define when an odor control system is required for new and expanding restaurants. Staff.
Thank you. This past summer, 2 appeals to the City Council related to the enforcement of odor control made it evident that the pertinent language in the zoning ordinance is vague and inadequate. The only language currently contained in the zoning ordinance in regard to odors is one about environmental effects. You'll see it there in your staff report. Basically, it says that the emission of odor in such concentrations as to be detrimental to or endanger the public health, welfare, comfort, safety, or cause injury to property or business is prohibited. Since the fall of 1986, it's been the practice of city staff to interpret this language to imply that emissions from a commercial kitchen with a Type 1 ventilation hood would emit odors to a degree that would be detrimental to the public comfort. As such, restaurants emitting such odors and adjacent to residential property would either be prohibited or would require some form of mechanical or chemical odor control. Discussions with former city employees have indicated that this interpretation was based on city council direction, resulting from vocal public objection to the impacts of odor caused by the Champs restaurant when that went in. Recent restaurants that have installed odor control devices include Pizza Luce, Miyama, Andale, Lin 65, and El Tejeban. And most recently, My Burger has been required to install that system. In the case of Lake Winds, the co-op, the adjacent residential is planned but not yet constructed. In this circumstance, staff required Lake Winds to plan for an odor control system and to ensure that their building could accommodate that system in the future if there are complaints from future residential neighbors. The city attorney has advised us that an abrupt change in the way staff administers the code as it pertains to odors without a formal change in policy could lead former applicants to the conclusion that the ordinance is being applied in an arbitrary and capricious manner. There is an agreement among staff, the city council, and the business community that the language in the current ordinance lacks the specificity for property owners to understand expectations and for staff to properly enforce it in accordance with public will. Staff is recommending, therefore, a zoning ordinance that will do the following. All new restaurant sites abutting or adjacent to existing residential properties shall install professionally designed odor control remedies per this ordinance. New restaurant sites abutting or adjacent to future residential development that is either as a result of how the comprehensive plan it will guide that land or an approved development plan will be required to provide plans for a professionally designed odor control system and a statement by a structural engineer that the building design could accommodate that system and the screening in the future if complaints arise. That would be the same set of rules applied to pre-existing restaurant sites, which are intensifying cooking, either their equipment or intensifying the odor emissions if they are abutting existing residential or residentially zoned property. So just to make that clear, that's for new restaurant sites that abut potential residential sites, and for existing restaurants that abut residential and are intensifying. So not just expanding, but intensifying, changing their menu or changing their equipment in some way which would potentially increase the amount of odors that they are producing. There's also an administrative exemption included in the proposed ordinance. Under this exemption, the Community Development Director would have the authority to exempt uses from these requirements with a written finding that the proposed commercial kitchen is for an institutional or similar use that would have limited hours of operation or minimal usage. You'll recall that there was an appeal this summer from a woman who was going to operate an adult daycare, and she was saying that there would be very limited hours of operation for that kitchen. This would allow the director, if he determined that because of those hours it would not be a nuisance, to exempt that type of use from these requirements. The rationale for treating the pre-existing restaurants and new restaurants adjacent to future residential differently is because occupants in those situations obviously knew about these restaurants when they moved into their homes and presumably understood the possible implications that would come with living near a restaurant. And then finally, just in terms of policy, you know, one of the primary goals of the zoning code is to foster good relationships between land uses. And so our job when we suggest policy is to try to balance the needs of the commercial and the adjacent residential and not be unduly burdensome to one or the other. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer those.
I have a question as well. You want to go first?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
In regards to, for new restaurant sites and the pre-existing sites that are being built to future residential development, there is a statement here that subsequent complaints of odor impacts may result in the requirement that the planned odor control device be installed. What is the process? If it's going to be adjacent to future ones, but if there's complaints other than adjacent to this new, then they would have to go, would they go through cities, they come before the council, would they go before the city staff? How would that process be communicated and how would it be utilized?
I think that would most likely be an administrative decision, and I don't think just one complaint would be enough to trigger the installation of an odor control system. We haven't talked about that part of it, though. If the council would like to hear all of these, you know, if an issue comes up and the council would like to hear it, we could certainly bring it to them. The way these things are typically handled is that they're decided at a staff level, at an administrative level, and then the applicant has the ability to appeal the decision of staff if they disagree, which is actually how these odor control complaints came to the council in the first place, is that if they disagree with the determination made by the community development director, they appeal to the council.
Well, I just want to make sure that the residents have that option and that they know that they're being protected in a sense for this sort of thing, because I'm not convinced that that's always, you know, that these past appeals, that was always taken into the strongest account that it should have been. And I just want to make sure for the residents' sake that their needs are being met. And that even though we encourage business, you know, yada, 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 we still are a residential community based in neighborhoods, and we still have to protect that. And that's my major concern, that communication will be met, so that they won't, any situation that comes up in a neighborhood, that they do have an option out there to protect themselves against odor and cooking odors and all that.
Right, and I think that's what we're trying to build in here, and they do have that option, just like residents have the option to report other nuisances to us, and we will continue to do our best.
Well, it applies to noise or traffic or anything else too.
That's right.
But sometimes odors are, you know, it can be subjective too, so, okay.
Okay, my question relates to the word intensifying. Okay, if we're going to clarify this, then why wouldn't we put in some identifiers as far as examples? Question would be, is intensifying, understand that goes as far as the foods themselves, okay? Would that also include if the restaurant increased its size of seats, because now it would be cooking more? Or would it also maybe even increase maybe because of the hours that it's in service, then therefore it would intensify? Or what was the rationale just to use the word intensify?
Right, and it says intensify cooking equipment or odor emissions. It's intended to apply to the equipment that they have. So it would be the adding additional equipment that will require type 1 hoods. You know, if you have one piece of equipment that let's just say you have a regular stovetop, and now you have added fryers. You would be intensifying the types of cooking equipment that you are using in the business. That is what we are trying to explain through this ordinance. It is not intended to apply to someone who is just adding seats to a restaurant. It is a change in the type of equipment you're using to prepare food.
And is there a need for that language at all? Question. I mean, because if in fact they extend their hours, you know, it still intensifies the smell. The whole idea is it intensifies the smell, however it does it. And whether it's an increase in the number of seats, it too could intensify because of the more cooking of an apparatus.
Mr.
Just a
Chairman,
question.
Yes, it certainly could, and the ordinance could be reworded to include those as well. That has not been the way that we have administered this in the past, and it's not the way that we intended to write it. But if that is the direction that you and the council would like us to go,
Right.
it can be reworded.
Mr. Chairman, not to be a wordsmith here, but if that's the intent, perhaps a better use or a better word would be augmenting cooking equipment, and then move the word intensifying to intensifying odor emissions. Just a suggestion.
I guess if we're playing wordsmithing, it's adjacent or abutting also. Really, how far away would a complaint be treated as reasonable? 1 block, 2 blocks? I mean, we've had restaurants, Susan and I, in the neighborhood, Phuket was overpowering at times, and yet I live a good block away from that restaurant when it was there. I mean, it was tough. Currently, only on a good day with the wind blowing right do I smell Devani's.
Well, I think we're talking about two different things here. The adjacent or abutting, as it's written now, is when we will require the addition of the odor control, is when we will look at these things. It is not who can make a complaint about odors. Obviously, odors can travel much, much farther than one adjacent property. But the way that we have administered the code historically and the way that this is written, when we require odor control is only if it is adjacent or, if not adjacent, within 150 feet of a residential property.
Question I have, yeah, actually for staff.
Go ahead.
Just a qualitative question. Are you comfortable with this? Do you think that this gives you as staff enough flexibility to deal with applicants for restaurants, food preparation that could produce odors, and yet maintain some civility in the arena of commercial development?
We are. At a staff level, I believe we are. I think that we felt strongly that new restaurants adjacent to existing residential facilities should generally have an odor control system. You're bringing a use in that folks were not used to, that maybe they didn't even consider when they purchased their homes, and it could be quite bothersome. I think it also gives the businesses, especially the existing businesses who are adjacent to residential already, some leeway in that they have coexisted in these residential neighborhoods for a long time. If they are not making changes that are now bothering the neighborhood, they don't have to install the system. However, it gives us the flexibility to say, you've made this change. It's become a nuisance to our residents. you have to address it. It gives us the ability to come back. So yes, I would say at a staff level, we are comfortable.
Okay, well, I'm still struggling with this, sorry. I mean, the intensifying piece, okay, we could use that, that's fine. But maybe it's as simple as something about a complaint. Instead of preliminary, making it go to the type of equipment or whatever. Because, like I said, you still could have intensifying, smells because of longer hours or more cooking, et cetera, et cetera. So are we making this too complicated by putting in that phrase? And maybe it's not necessary. In other words, it's something like that says the restaurant which changes its cooking equipment and exhibits odors that produce complaints from the residents. Maybe it's as simple as that.
So, Chair Jabs, the only thing I would point out is that doesn't give people the ability to anticipate problems, and it doesn't give businesses some amount of certainty as they're planning. If you're looking at intensifying your use, if you're looking at an expansion of what it is you're going to do, having an expansion followed by what if, and then turn it into a secondary public debate over your usage and whether or not you've actually made something smell in the neighborhood, doesn't really help from a community perspective. So the complaint side is there no matter what. What we're saying is if you're I think what staff is saying is if you're going to drive up your usage, if you're going to become a more intense economic participant or a more intense smell emitter, you get a second look as a matter of your permit process. The residents can still complain, but I think if we leave it to fully complaint-based, we haven't really done anybody any favors.
Okay, well but then you come back, and then you've got to include the hours of business expanded and the number of people being served as a prerequisite of the intensifying.
Well,
because it still would, could affect it, and doesn't necessarily because of the equipment you're putting in.
No, yes, I understand what you're saying. I think from a correlation perspective, the type of equipment is going to more directly correlate to the amount of smell rather than hours of operation, because hours of operation are not necessarily always an item related to a permit or an activity. So very few of our businesses are restricted in their hours of operation. And given that people can only have their windows open 6 months out of the year anyway.
Well, if you were a restaurant that, for instance, decided now to go into a wood fire grill, those get pretty odoriferous. I mean, you can smell them a couple miles off. If they were to be alerted that, yes, I'm going to now have wood-fired whatever, pizza, fish, pretty good indication that there's going to be some odors produced. You can't tell or predict the absolute intensity of that. Maybe it's going to be, self-contained, there isn't going to be a lot of emissions, but staff would then be able to, just by virtue of the fact that an owner comes in and says, I'm going to do this, would be able to investigate it and recommend equipment. Would that be a fair way of phrasing it? I mean, just
to paraphrase, I think you're saying that we would be more likely to see this beforehand and catch it.
Yeah.
You're right, because a permit would be needed to install a different type of cooking equipment as opposed to changing hours. Adding seats, they will likely need a permit for us, so we would see that. I guess my comment on that is that it can certainly be written that way. It can certainly be written to require at least the preparation of the plans and the accommodation of a system without installation, if you're doing any sort of expansion, seating, into hours, whatever it is, that would have required, as an example, Broadway Pizza to have addressed the odor control issue. There are a number of other restaurants in the city that have not required odor control because they have come in, they have taken over an existing restaurant, they have not changed the level of cooking equipment. Other restaurants that would have required this, and maybe that's where the community wants to go. My input on that would be that we have not typically had issues with that. That is not an item that has come up historically for us. It has generally been a change in the food type, which often accompanies a change in equipment or a new site.
Yeah, but you could come back and like with our last applicant that was in here, they had no complaints.
Right.
So I mean, it doesn't, we could put down all the what ifs. I mean, I think my point is that if we're going to change this, we're going to do something with it, then in effect it should address the issue as such, and that is, it's an odor. However, whatever, it's an odor that's more extreme than what it was before, for whatever reason, whether that's longer hours, different type of food, different type of equipment, more seating, let's just say, because you're going to cook longer or whatever. So, I mean, you've got all those things that come into play. So can it just be signaled back to, like I said, the intensification, however we said it, with the equipment as such? And that's where I'm kind of drawing my line as far as, again, coming back to protecting the neighborhood to make sure that they've got the complaint process that they can bring forward for remediation if they need it. Not to say that they have to put in the equipment, they have to plan for it, et cetera, and what makes that the advent. So I guess my suggestion would be at this point is to look at this one more time before we do anything. That's my proposal, and if anyone else buys into it, fine. But I'm not quite ready to do this the way it is at this point, only because I don't think it covers all the issues.
I would agree, it doesn't, and I don't think you could craft an ordinance that would cover all of the conditions. And this, I agree with Commissioner Vizecki. The complaint process is always there. Whether it's there codified or not, citizens have the right to come and complain. I'm sure you've experienced that as a city council member. People can come and complain. I'm biased towards wanting an ordinance that will give city staff enough flexibility to use their judgment and professional skills at avoiding situations that are going to necessitate complaints. If I'm going to change anything, I'd rather change it in favor of flexibility rather than confining uses. And hence my question, if you're comfortable with this, does it give you the flexibility? Is there more or less flexibility? Then that's what I'm concerned about.
So I hear where Chair Jabs is at, but I want to float a motion to approve the amendment with the comments from Commissioner Stanfus incorporated around yes.
I just wanted to make one comment. I was thinking about your proposed changes. By putting in augmenting, I worry by removing augmenting, or removing intensifying and putting in augmenting, I worry that we are capturing people we don't want to. Perhaps you're actually putting, instead of a type 1 hood, you're removing that and putting in steamers.
I was just trying to capture the intent that you expressed at the moment you were answering Chair Jab's question. And that appeared to be, in terms of, as you were explaining what intensifying meant in terms of equipment, you were talking about augmenting equipment, changing the character of equipment. That's augmenting equipment.
Right, but changing the character could go the other way as well, and I do not
I mean,
want to capture.
you don't intensify a piece of equipment in a sense.
Right, you don't turn up to 11.
Right.
Right.
Right. You augment a piece of equipment. You improve it in some way, or you change the character of the equipment.
Okay.
Or maybe that's what you say. You change the character of the equipment. Whatever it is, you don't intensify the equipment.
Okay.
You need a different word there, but you can intensify the odor. That's okay. So you can move that word intensify over to where the odor is.
Okay.
And now you've got two lawyers talking about it here. That's the problem.
And I know, that's why I gotta get both of you, gotta get both of you out of here. Okay, is it as simple as,
Augment the equipment to intensify the cooking process.
is it as simple as leaving the word intensifying, but take out cooking equipment and leave it just as intensifying odor emissions? Because now you've taken everything out of picture. You don't have to get specific with its, increased seating, it's whatever.
Sure, why did it happen?
It just take out the equipment piece. And I can live with it.
But I have a quick question. But how would you know that in advance, that it would intensify the odor?
Because you got a complaint from a resident. And that's all it really takes. And so what you've done is and the whole thing is, it's about odors, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, and so if in fact you just say that it's intensifying odors, leave it at that and take out, and I don't know why that equipment piece has to be in there.
Well, I think I see the equipment as a trigger issue. Odor is a post-event. It happened after someone already spent all the money for the install. Odor happened, and the complaint started, which if the applicant could have been tipped off that it were an issue in the application process, new equipment requires the nature of application that would give rise to the odor discussion.
I agree with you, but also would increase seating, also would expanded hours, also would a change of food venue. Three items, at least, including the equipment.
So I was mid-sentence in a motion to approve with augmented and create this refinement. So I move that we approve with Commissioner Stanfus's suggestion around augmented equipment.
And I'll second.
Just hold on one second. This is a public hearing, and have we closed it at all yet? No, so this is just discussion. Okay. So if there's anyone that wishes to talk to this, we still have to allow that before we go into that. Okay. So this was discussion only.
Okay.
I retract my motion.
I'll retract my second.
Thank you. Okay.
Somebody wants to speak.
Okay, so we'll come back to, I guess, let's look to see if there's any comments from the audience. Maybe they'll be able to help us. So is there anyone that wishes to speak to this issue? Sorry, we get lost.
Okay, I was starting to get worried that was going to be it. Angie Schaefbauer with the Richfield Chamber. And so this is a topic that has been discussed a lot in the business community amongst restaurants, and I appreciate the opportunity to ask some questions. Allison nailed one of my questions right away, in that this is, globally speaking, with this ordinance, this community of Richfield is one of very, very few that even have the ordinance. We're right next door to Edina. They do not have this ordinance. Bloomington, Woodbury, and Richfield are the three metro communities that have this ordinance. That being said, we have to look at commercial development and new business and welcoming businesses into this community. And if I have acquaintances that are in the property management industry in Woodbury, and I've had these conversations with them as well, and how do you approach businesses that are coming to town? And she's told me right out of the bat, first question, our first statement I have to make is, you are gonna have to get an odor control system, period, end of story. That's from a business anywhere from $40,000 to $70,000 or $80,000. That is not an investment. It's not a dollar they're ever going to get back out of that business. And if you look at that in terms, I said, well, what does that mean to you? What is the end result of something like that? And she said, well, look at my community. It's all chains. You won't get a mom and pop You won't get a small cafe. You're not going to get a small restaurant because right out of the gate, they cannot conform to that requirement. So as a community, I understand, it's condensed population, odors, residents, but there's been a lot of restaurants that have existed here for a long time with residents right behind them, and they coexist. I know that this ordinance originated from the Champs and Village Shores setup. And I guess when I looked at the ordinance originally, it's a 2-line sentence, and I appreciate the opportunity that this is going to be revised. At the same time, I'm hoping that somehow, there's always been this jump from this 2-sentence statement of you need to mitigate odor to an $80,000 piece of equipment that needs to be installed. I'd have to examine, and I'm curious if there's been any conversations with the restaurant industry, developments and equipment that have happened in the last 30 years. I'd have to believe that, yeah, you're putting in a fryer or something that is going to result in intensified odors, but I'd have to believe that there have been developments in that equipment that mitigate the odor way better than it did 30 years ago. So my hope and input on this language that's being developed is, if the ordinance has to stay, because of course I would love to see it just not exist, but if it has to stay, I would hope that in some way there's a language that the business owner could say, yeah, I'm going to put this equipment in, but according to the manufacturer, this is how this equipment will mitigate the odor without the need and the burden of this very expensive piece of equipment. So it's a long-winded statement, but basically I'm just trying to say there's a big gap between mitigating odor and how that odor gets mitigated, and I'm hoping that staff will be able to have the flexibility that it doesn't mean you jump to an $80,000 piece of equipment to do this. Because if that's the case, we'll welcome a bunch of chains into Richfield, and we will lose the uniqueness and the smallness that Richfield is known for. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, I ask for a motion to close the public hearing. Motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Okay. So. Discussion.
I just want to address that. I don't think there's anyone up here that would be saying that the staff shouldn't have flexibility to utilize whatever equipment is out there. And no one is saying that they have to use a certain level of equipment. It's to protect the neighborhoods. And I get really tired of this argument that Edina doesn't do this and some other suburbs. Richfield is 7 square miles, and it's primarily a bedroom residential community that really does welcome business, but we do have to protect our neighborhoods. And I am glad that we have this type of an ordinance, because we have to protect the neighborhoods, and I don't think by eliminating this, the neighborhoods would be taken care of in the way that they should be. People live here. So Edina has a lot more space. St. Louis Park has a lot more space. I'm glad Bloomington has. At least they have a lot of space and they're still doing the right thing. And Woodbury or whoever else. But Richfield is unique. We have small lots. Like in my neighborhood, I'm right behind Fireside Pizza, or few blocks over, but we have alleys. We have very narrow lots. We are close together. And so we need to have someone looking out for us in regards to businesses that don't toe the line. So I, as far as the verbiage here, I'll work with Rick or whoever about getting this straightened out, but I want to maintain this. I really want to have this ordinance available to us. And if there is a $30,000 or a $10,000 piece of equipment can do it, more power to it. I have no problem with that. I'm not expecting a certain level of equipment. I'm expecting the results, and so if something cheaper can do it, so be it. But we do need to maintain that ordinance for the sake of our neighborhoods.
Anyone else? Tom?
I guess where we're hung up just a little bit is, and you two lawyers will see this, is the word shall, which has no flexibility. Shall is shall. You shall do this, period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Would that be a correct interpretation from, okay. So a new restaurant has to install professionally designed odor control remedies. What is a professionally designed odor control remedy that works? I mean, is that truly a $40,000 or a $150,000 investment? Or is that muffled exhaust fans that seem to collect the odors before they get very far out of the parking lot?
Thanks for that question, Commissioner Rublin. This ordinance, nor has staff ever prescribed what type of odor control system any business needs to install. What we have said is that odor mitigation is required. And that is what this ordinance says. It says that odor mitigation is required. The applicant is required to go to a professional in this field and say, these are the types of things I'm cooking. What type of system do I need to control for that? Whether that is just filters, whether that is a full scrubber system, that is for the applicant and the designer to determine. That is, staff just says mitigate the odors. If you can do that for $30, fantastic, wonderful. If it costs you more, then that is what you and your designer, that's the determination that they come to. It is not staff's intent to prescribe a specific type of odor control system for any restaurant. The other thing I wanted to mention is that while Bloomington and Woodbury do administer their odor control, they administer their odor control requirements in a very similar manner to us. It's generally based on the equipment, the fact that you have a Type 1 hood. There are many communities in the metro and the state that have odor control requirements. They just don't administer them in this type of way. They may come back after the fact. They may have other policies. But Bloomington and Woodbury were called out in some of the earlier reports because it's a very similar process. But there are other communities that do this.
Okay, so just back to our original comments and questions relative to intensifying. Couldn't you intensify cooking equipment and still have no odor impact?
Sure, absolutely. And
so why do we have that in there? I mean, if we come back to the odor is the issue, and the only way that it's going to be part of this, it doesn't deal with intensifying equipment. It's the odor. I mean, or what am I missing? I don't get it, because or is that just a way to say, yes, you have to do this because you're intensifying your equipment, when in fact it may not even add smell or odor, whatever we wish to call it, to anything?
Volume. If you're cooking 2 hamburgers, you're hardly going to be producing any kind of an odor. You produce, or cooking 200 hamburgers, it's simple multiplication. You're going to have much more odor. I think that's where the idea of you're intensifying the equipment to.
But Tom, people might like the odor. People might like the odor.
Well, okay,
I mean, we don't know this. I mean, that's what's so silly about this, is that it comes to a point where it's a matter whether people enjoy the odor or don't enjoy the odor. And whether it's intensified is okay, but the thing that's going to happen here is if they come and complain. So isn't it still all about just odor?
I agree that it's odor. I think the issue, Commissioner Jabs, is that the best opportunity to anticipate a problem is at the application stage, not after it's been built. So if we look at the test, that's been laid out for when the structural engineer sign off and the capability to install the equipment happens, under this model, it's with an intensification in equipment. The change you're proposing is any change in seating would require the structural engineer sign off and the applicable equipment compatibility, or any other item, where if the baseline test is if you have a type 1 hood, then odor consideration, odor mitigation is a consideration.
But we just came back and I got a nod that the intensification may not cause odor. It may not, because it's all in the, it's a person's, decision. Do I like this odor or do I not? People haven't complained about Fireside Pizza. So I don't get this. I mean, I'm still lost in it, and I still can't approve it the way it is, because I don't think we've tackled the issue in a way that's meaningful and allows the businesses to use it in a way that says, I'm going to have to do this or I'm not going to have to do this, and should I add it to the plans? Because it's not about the equipment. I just got a nod on that. So it's about the odor intensification.
No, I think what you got a nod to was that it is technically possible to change equipment and not intensify odor. Yeah. But so just because those two things are correlated, it doesn't mean it's causative.
But why would I link it then to something that someone has to have modifications for?
Because the other option is the option of let's undo odor ordinance altogether and say, if people have a complaint, here's how we'll address it.
Maybe so.
Oh, and
per what Angie had to say, and that's where, again, maybe that's the direction to take. Maybe this isn't even necessary, and maybe it's, again, time to table it, and I'm sorry, go back to the drawing board one more time and figure out with business if this is necessary at all.
So if the recommendation is to table with the notion that we move solely to complaint-based, I don't have an argument. I was looking at the city attorney's opinion that a dramatic departure in administration absent a change in ordinance could open up problems for the city because of whipsaw administration.
Well, I didn't quite get that, but I'm going to go with it, that I think that it's necessary for staff to sit down with business and figure out if this is necessary at all.
Do we know if
that's where I'll go, just to kind of make it simple for me, and because that's where I see it as, is it necessary? Because I don't think I'm still not getting it as far as this, because like I said, the equipment doesn't do it.
Chair Jabs, do we know if that's already happened?
Commissioner, we have not sat down with individual businesses. I can tell you that we have talked to chamber representatives, and we're fairly clear that the chamber would prefer that we just remove the requirement. I mean, right? Right. So I think that the ordinance, I can tell you, the ordinance was drafted based on what's happened this summer and the direction we were given by the council and the feedback that we thought we heard before you with the appeal from Fireside Pizza. That's why this is drafted. If you would like to reconsider, or if you'd like us to go back, we certainly can do that. We can certainly keep looking at this language. My gut tells me that businesses are going to, restaurants do not like this. They do not want it. Okay. I don't know that it's productive for us to go and meet with each individual.
So what's wrong with going back to complaint basis? Legally, is there an issue?
I'd have to ask this city attorney what the ramifications would be of just completely removing it. I can tell you that the difficulty would be if there are complaints asking people to retrofit their systems.
Sure. Well, I just think we're not there yet. Okay, and so I'm gonna ask for someone to make a motion that tables this for
Okay.
further discussion and just to see where we're at. And I mean, because even we're just having back and forth relative to some of the things that we're thinking. And I think that it's not ready for us. And I think that maybe it does require a nice little sit-down session with the chamber representatives and the attorney, obviously, to make sure that it's conforming and takes care of itself. But my opinion is that it should be tabled and looked at a little bit in the future if in fact it's necessary at all.
So Commissioner Jabs, just one clarifying point. Tabling this issue doesn't actually fix anything because the way staff was currently administering it was any installation of a type 1 hood triggers the obligation. So we're not even at a complaint-based system if we table. We haven't added any clarity for staff, and we still have the same framework that existed in the context of the fireside
I
application.
think for a couple more months, that's okay.
Staff, what are pending permits that are out there right now? Do we have applications that are pending?
I don't believe there are any restaurant applications pending.
All right. Just so we don't pinch anybody.
Sure, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. So any other discussion on that? Or is there a motion?
A motion to table is not debatable. You just vote it up or down.
Okay. Any other discussion then?
Well, I just have a question. What would this mean to businesses such as Lynn 65 or My Burger or whatever the new ones coming in that have already, have conformed to the ordinance, especially when it comes to odor? I mean, they're gonna just, if we drop it, they're just, I just think it's a really dangerous precedent, and it's really something that we don't want to have. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So, I'm willing to table it now, but I would not support a dropping of this ordinance. I think there has to be something there in some kind of form to be able to protect, like I said, I keep saying it, the neighborhoods. So there is something for them to fall back on. And if it's a verbiage thing, or however, what's intensifying cooking equipment or odors, we can hash that out all night. Blacklist is coming on at 9 o'clock, and I gotta get home. So
Okay, but point is that there is also already something in existence. So you already have done something relative to the other businesses, been able to work through those situations. We're not leaving this just without anything. It's just that we want this particular one looked at to make sure, to see if it's the right thing to do.
Stepwise, even if we were to go ahead and vote this, city council still has to approve it, correct? So the city council could come back and say, we're sensitive to the discussion that happened at the planning commission.
it's their choice.
And they can also choose to table it or move it forward.
Yep.
You're right, we could wait that, but I'm not ready to do, I don't want to do that. Personally, I want it to be something that we've discussed and thoroughly discussed and make sure that it's something that they can live with too.
I'm not going to re-articulate Susan's points, but I agree with what she said due to time. I don't want to go.
Should not even be a consideration. Okay, any other discussion on the table? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
One nay. Okay, carries. Thank you. So you get the idea of where we want to go? And is there any other questions that you have? Are we okay?
I got the idea that you want to keep talking about it
No.
at a different date. Okay, so so you're suggesting a work session then, or you're just suggesting that staff?
A work session may not be a bad idea to sit down and give the chamber a chance to discuss it with the city officials and get some ideas on the table that we can work through and make this thing a workable document.
Okay, and just to clarify, there were 2 nays for the motion to table. Yes, two. Technically, we had a lot of debate on a motion that isn't debatable. You just make the motion to table, it's voted up or down. There isn't any further discussion on it.
Two, I'm sorry. Who were they?
Okay, Gordon and myself.
Oh, okay. I didn't see that. Okay. Very good.
Okay.
Okay.
I did want to say one thing, and I'm going to check with the city attorney on this, but because you have moved to table the issue, but the public hearing, correct, was closed?
Yes.
Yes,
Yep.
the public hearing was closed, and you are a recommending body. We will go back and we'll make sure how this works, but I don't know that the council necessarily has to wait for you to make a recommendation. So I just want you to be aware, I'll look into it and I'll of course let you all know, but the council could choose to move forward with this just without a recommendation.
Understood.
Okay.
Okay, item number 4 is consideration of amendment to the city zoning ordinance. Proposed ordinance would add municipal parking lots to a list of permitted uses on the Penn Avenue Corridor Overlay District. Staff.
Thank you. Over the past few years, parking in the Penn Avenue corridor has been a near constant issue. Parking is not generally permitted as a primary or sole use in any district in the city. However, the unique characteristics of the Penn Avenue corridor make this an option that the city might want to consider in the future. There are no current plans for a municipal parking lot on Penn Avenue, but we're proposing this change so that we can leave our options open. Any questions?
Quick question. What's the length of the corridor when you say the Penn Avenue corridor? So just from one end of Penn in Richfield to the other end?
No, it's the area that is defined, the Penn Avenue corridor is a defined overlay district in the zoning code. Generally, it is from Highway 62 to 67th Street, right? And it extends, in most cases, a half block back from Penn.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any questions to staff? Okay, this is a public hearing. Anyone wish to address this? Okay, seeing none, ask for a motion to close.
So moved.
Motion and second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, yeah, I think this is a great idea. I mean, I think this is something that needs to get going in order to get anything going along Penn. So I just, with all the issues we've had relative to parking, and with just the small businesses, I think it just is something that would really, help promote that area a lot more. So that's where I'm at. Other comments, questions?
I've advocated this for quite a while.
Very good. Then here you go. You can make the motion then.
I will make the motion to pass staff's recommended motion to allow municipally owned parking lots on Penn Avenue.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. Thank you. Okay, let's see. New business. Item number 5, change of December Planning Commission meeting staff.
Thank you. There is an error in the staff report, so I will highlight that as we go along. The December Planning Commission falls on Monday, December 22nd. December 8th is the second Monday of the month, and that is our study session date for that month. There is actually a study session scheduled for that day, so you will already be here on December 8th. That is our typical transportation update with Jeff Pearson, the transportation engineer. So staff's proposing that the commission reschedule the regular December meeting date to December 8th to follow that study session if it's needed because of the proximity of the holiday.
I will move recommended action.
Second.
Okay, motion and second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Carries.
No, I will also say that I will, like an excused absence, I will not be in town December 8th.
Okay. Let's see, liaison reports. Community Services Commission, Tom.
All right. Oh, geez, they just have a whole lot of stuff. The new play equipment's going in at Vets Park. As many of you already know, there was a new pavilion dedicated near Wood Lake for Emily Day, named after her, wonderful person who has reached 101 years old, as a matter of fact. Also, there's new park shelter at Roosevelt Park. There are some ball field improvement have gone in at Monroe Park, which incident I'd like to point out was funded by Toro in part.
And the Twins?
And the Twins. There also is a discussion of new play equipment at Garfield Park. How many of you know where Garfield Park is? Garfield Park is a little park just east of Glendale, behind a lot of the apartment buildings at about 63rd. And there's some antiquated equipment there. So the Community Services Commission is looking at what to do with that park and refurbish it with the idea of it being a neighborhood park. So there would be some additional equipment, but also looking at trying to service apartments in that area. So Jim may come to you and ask you are there any plans for that particular area, even plans further down the road. I mean, if they're going to invest $75,000 to $100,000 in refurbishing a park, they want to do it right. So I suggested that he come and see you on that. But that's kind of what they're up to. They're a busy group of people.
Very good, thank you. City Council? Hearing none? Okay, housing redevelopment?
Let's see, the meeting took place on October 20th. Oops, the meeting took place on October 20th. There's a presentation on the housing marketing plan, as well as a presentation on the 30th anniversary of the Richfield Deferred Loan Program. And also Matt sent out a memo to the commissioners from the HRA also. So that should be in your email.
Very good. School Board?
No report.
Transportation Committee?
No, Transportation Committee work on the street updates and with the 66th and Portland, and so they're going to be doing some voting tomorrow night on the final stages of 66th east of Penn. So there's going to be quite a few changes, and if you've noticed the flags on the yards north of 66th between 35W and Penn, that's where the road's going to take some of those yards. No houses, but some of the properties.
Chamber of Commerce?
Lots of exciting stuff going on. Ribbon cutting last week for the 30th anniversary of Posters on Board. Ribbon cutting Thursday, November 13th for the new officers of Mazer, Amundsen, Bojo, Hendricks, which should be an exciting time. Lots of other fun stuff listed on the Chamber website.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, City Planners Report.
You will have noticed that the Phase 2 of the Wellington development is now under construction. And I'm sure you saw the report in the Sun Current about the moving of the family statue. They expect to begin tenant finish early in the spring, February or March, and be open hopefully in June. That's about it, except to mention that the joint work session on November 10th is about medical marijuana. So you will, all of the applications were due to the state by a couple weeks ago, maybe last week. 12 different manufacturers have applied to the state for their licenses. Each of those will be looking for 4 distribution sites throughout the state. And so we'll be discussing any regulations we would want to put on those in addition to what state statute requires. So that should be an exciting one. That's it.
Very good. Anything else? Okay, ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, thank you.
All right.